All right, council, good evening. Today is Wednesday, October the 12th. Just like any other meeting, we will begin the same way by reciting the Lord's Prayer and Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll get into the order of business.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Absolutely. Dan DiTillo.
Here.
Jim Bartlett.
Here.
Chatham.
Here.
Schaefer. DiTillo, Lucy DiTillo.
Here.
Krebs.
Here.
And Tevenoff.
Here.
Make a motion for the minutes. I guess we could proceed with the minutes and dispose of those if you'd like. We just need a motion for the minutes and a second.
Move to approve the October 4th minutes.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
So I think what's next on the agenda is the bills on second reading. And what you guys have in front of you is the Form 4, which there's been a little bit of confusion on with regard to the notice of taxpayers and what that is in ordinance. They're essentially exactly the same, except this is what will be the final, but the wording up above is the same. So I believe that we are at ordinance number 2022-23, and that's the ordinance for appropriation in tax rates that was tabled at the last meeting. So I think that is open for discussion now, and that's where we are.
And I'll just tee it up, and I know Mitty is here, and Katie as well, to go over your questions with regards to this ordinance. What we are proposing for the 2023 budget is for an adoption in the total amount of $12,730,981, which includes the lease rental payment for the Parks Department's and Redevelopment Commission's funding of the Crystal Beach, and then the rest of it is operational. There's also a allocation of tax levy that's on this form. Again, nothing is final until DLGF actually issues a 1782, but what we're proposing is that council discuss tonight the adoption of the $12,730,981 annual budget for 2023. Come on up.
Joe, I'm assuming we don't need to bring that off the table?
I move that we move ordinances 2022, 23, 24, and 25 off the table.
I will second that.
Aye.
Aye.
Council, just wanted to give you a little bit of summary information and then happy to take any questions that you have on this budget. So what you have in front of you is you have your ordinance that shows the total amounts, and you have a detailed document that shows every single line item. And that will show you what we are proposing for this budget for each line item, as well as what we budgeted last year and what we spent the full year before that. So it's a lot of good information for you. It shows amount of increase and all of the intimate details that you might want to see or might need to see at some point. It's really just supportive information right now for this document, which is your budget order. And then you also have a summary document that shows you the large categories, but not all the detail. So these two documents match in terms of the amounts that we're asking you to approve in the overall budget. So just a couple of things I wanted to mention before we enter discussion, and that is the goal of our budget process for this coming year is to present you what we think is a really responsible and balanced and conservative budget. So we've estimated tax revenue, and we have, as close as possible, given you appropriations that match those estimates. Okay? So we're not appropriating more than we're receiving in tax revenue, and I think that's an important change. So the numbers that you saw at workshop are less now for that reason, and specifically in general fund. We want to make sure that we true up what our general fund tax levy is with our general fund appropriations and make sure that they're in line. So that's the goal of this whole exercise for us this year. And I want you to keep in mind a couple of things as we talk about specific numbers. And that is, this budget overall includes a 10% increase in our benefits cost. We did not pass any of that along to our employees. The city is taking that extra 10% on. So all of that is included in here. We originally estimated a 5% increase, salary increase for our employees. It was important for us in all of the different things we needed to look at that we not touch that if we don't have to. It's getting very difficult to hire and maintain employees, and we think it's important to keep the salaries as high as we can afford to do that. So all of the numbers that you're looking at still include a 5% salary increase for all of our employees. And also keep in mind that utility costs, fuel, electric, gas, all of that has already gone up significantly. We don't know how to anticipate how much more, so there's room in there for further increases because we know that will happen. So in general, those are my comments. I have my laptop here that shows everything that we've done. I have more detail if you want to get into it, so I will just open it for questions to you and try to answer any questions that you have.
Hi, I just want to ask about the lit public safety monies we return to the county. Is
Yes,
that correct?
correct.
That's per our agreement that we made a couple of years ago?
That's correct.
So how does that money just go as a one lump sum transfer
Yes.
back?
So here's, I'm glad you brought that up because that's one difference we need to point out. So in the past, the budgets for lit public safety have included only the items that we were going to appropriate back out of it, even though we were sending half of that check back to the county. We were just doing that.
Okay.
So what we should be doing is appropriating the entire amount. So we're anticipating, I think it's 1.53 for next year. We need to appropriate that entire amount, and then our own appropriations plus a lump sum appropriation back to the county, which we can do either way. We do it monthly because it tends to change a little bit, but we had not been doing that, and we need to start doing that. Now, the difference in this budget is that we're showing that $1 million that we're anticipating, but we're still only appropriating our section. So we're going to have to come back to council and ask you to do an appropriation for that other half. We just did not have time to get all that incorporated in here.
Thank you.
So there's a couple of differences there. You've got the 425, I can't remember if that's included on the summary.
The 425 is included in the ordinance, but relative to the operational workbook, it's not included in the 12305. So if you took, like if you took the ordinance, there's two numbers really important on the ordinance. The adopted budget of the appropriated funds through DLGF, and that's $10,372,677, plus the home ruled funds that aren't reviewed by DLGF, which includes other revenue sources such as our county tax and our lit public safety and a couple of other things, non-reverting funds. That's $2,358,304. That's $12,730,981, and the two reconcile if you subtract the $425,000 separate lease payment. That 12305 reconciles to the worksheet. We wanted to make sure you had a really clear understanding operationally as to what the breakdown between general fund and other, more discretionary operations are. Hit your mic, if you mind. That way, Josh can hear okay. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Specifically, what are we looking at for this ordinance right now? Is it the Form 3 or the Form 4?
Form 4.
Form 4.
The Form 3 is
Okay.
a notice to taxpayers, and so that's a dollar amount that gets out there that's really based on estimates. And the significance of that is to just inform the taxpayers that we're going through the budget process. And at the time that notice is published, because it's really early in the process, it's all based on estimates. The ordinance is actually what you'll be adopting. And I think what's a little confusing, as Joe was mentioning about this process, in the past, we've taken the notice to taxpayers and put an ordinance number on it. And then later, once we got the 1782 notice of our certified budget order from DLGF, that's when we actually signed the Form 4 ordinance.
Okay.
But given the discussion last week, we thought it provided more clarity if we're taking through the process, the three readings, the actual ordinance, rather than a notice to taxpayers.
When that 1782 notice is available, can we all get a copy of that?
Yes, you'll get it when
Okay.
the budget will be submitted by November. We have 5 days after the actual adoption of the budget, and then DLGF will sometime in November send us their budget order.
Okay.
Are there any other questions on this one?
Why are we backing off appropriations for rainy day now?
Because we don't receive tax revenue for rainy day. That truly is extra funds that we have, so that was coming right out of our levies, but we don't receive tax revenue for it. So we can appropriate to it if we need to, or do special appropriations, but we just felt like this year we don't want to appropriate when we don't have revenue for it.
But as we go through the course of the year, and there are appropriations that we've made that we didn't actually spend the money for, and we'd come back to council to transfer funds to the rainy day fund,
Correct.
or to a Main Street NRO or another reserve account.
Also, one other comment I wanted to make about that, DLGF will look at these numbers that we're presenting to them as if we're going to spend every single penny. So they're also going to look at the revenue side and make sure that we receive enough to spend every single penny. So that's what we've constructed the numbers to support. We're not going to spend every penny, we never do, but that's how they're going to look at it, so that's how we've developed the budget.
And the police pension fund, it's projecting an $80,000 deficit. What will be the cause of that deficit?
I don't do the budget for the police pension, that comes from their secretary, so we strictly use their numbers on it. But the deficit numbers that you're seeing don't include any of the reserves that are already in there.
Okay.
So there's a source to pay it if it's actually accrued
Yeah,
liability.
yeah.
Right, and that's also estimates based on, who's gonna retire, who's gonna,
Just feel it's based on what I've seen working in other states and with very poorly managed governments, I don't want to see us push too far into running deficits on pension funds. I just think
We don't have any unfunded accrued liability, if that's your concern. This is really purely budgetary that, you know, as we go through and you do the actuaries to determine what you actually have to fund, we're fully funding it. If it requires more, as Minnie was saying, we have reserves already in that pension fund that we can transfer to an appropriation if we need to.
Okay.
He does his calculations based on whatever, you know, system they use, so he's probably being safe.
Okay. I think overall you guys got a pretty good budget this year.
Thank you.
Thank you, I agree.
Any questions from the audience? Seeing none, I tried to go quick, Rick.
Gotta be quick,
you-
man.
You gotta be on the move, buddy. You gotta be on the move.
Rick Roos, 1421 Cherokee Court. And it's just a question, I believe everything everybody's saying and all that stuff, but I'm a process wonk. Now, are the numbers in the second reading the same as in the first reading?
Yes, this is the second reading, and this number hasn't changed. There was the notice of taxpayer, and some of those numbers were estimates.
Well, I
revenue
understand that,
estimates.
I'm just saying that the first reading to the council are these numbers. You adopted that to go to second reading, now you're gonna adopt second reading to go to third reading and pass the whole thing. Am I,
This is a process, and it's
I
been,
know.
it's been a little bit confusing to me too, frankly. And it has, it seems to have changed sometimes year after year. So the council did not have these numbers in front of them on the first reading.
They had a notice to taxpayers which had higher dollar amounts in them because they were based on estimates. So as we went through and refined it and converted the notice to taxpayers to an actual ordinance that we're asking council to adopt, now it's, you know, it's quite a bit less, several percentage points less.
The issue is the ordinance is
It's fine.
the body of this,
right,
of the work. And then the budget fluctuates a little bit until its actual adoption. But these numbers here will not change from now until the adoption on third reading.
okay, thanks.
And Mr. Roos, I wanted to also follow up just a little bit in that, and not to get into a policy discussion or a process discussion, but it is legal to make changes right up to the 1782, right up until we submit. It is, we don't typically do that. We don't want to do that. That's why we finalized the budget and presented it to them, but you can.
And I think for everybody's I think we're going to, the plan is probably in the spring, have a budget workshop, because there does appear to be some things that a lot of other communities do that frankly make this process a little bit easier than we do. And so we plan to do that, all get a little bit of education. We're not doing anything wrong here, but I think it will be helpful going forward on how at least this adoption process goes. Anybody else? See, Rick's the only person in the audience, other than the media. Okay, so that will move on from second reading to third reading at next Tuesday. The next one is ordinance number 2022-24, and that is fixing compensation for elected officials. It's on second reading. Is there any comment or questions with regard to that bill? Hearing none, that will go on to third reading. And the next one is ordinance number 2022-25, an ordinance fixing salaries of appointed officers and employees of the city of Madison for the year 2023. Are there any questions or comments regarding that bill as presented?
I have some concerns with the maximum salaries that have been listed for some of them. I think we've got a lot of maximums that are significantly higher than what we're allocating for these positions. I'd like to see us pull the maximums back down so city council can have a little bit more oversight with what goes out in terms of payroll changes that take place after the first of the year, after we've adopted our budget. And additionally, there were a few of the yearly rates under annual rate by job classification, where the maximums we have listed are less than the amount that we're allocating for the position. Deputy Chief EMS Operations, yearly rates $5,720. We're now allocating $25,000 for that. Deputy Chief Fire Ground Operations, yearly rate $6,545. We're now allocating $10,500. Battalion Chiefs, yearly rate $48.40. We're allocating $5,000. And the attorney for the Plan Commission, maximum of $12,100. We allocated $13,000 under that category. So I'm gonna make two separate motions here. The first would be, I would move to amend, ordinance 2022-25 to amend the annual rate classification for those, for those four positions to match the allocations for those positions within the budget.
Patrick, can you say those again, because I didn't write them, I didn't get them all written down?
Yeah, it's Deputy Chief EMS Operations. And that new yearly rate should be $25,000. Deputy Chief Fire Ground Operations, that new maximum should be $10,500. Battalion Chiefs, $5,000 for the new maximum. And attorney for the Plan Commission should be $13,000. That would bring our maximums in line with what we're actually allocating for those positions.
We have a motion to amend that. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion second. Any comment on that?
Make a comment? Agree. Those need to be updated, so thank you.
Any other comment? So we have an amendment that's on the floor, it's been seconded.
So 5,000 is what we're actually allocating for battalion chiefs. We have 10,000 in.
Okay, I believe 2 battalion chiefs. I think so.
So, okay, so it'd be per, okay, thank you. That's, I get it now, thanks.
Any other comments? Roll call.
Dan DiTillo,
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes.
Lucy DiTillo,
Yes.
Carly Krebs,
Yes.
Patrick Tevenall,
Yes.
Curtis Chatham,
Yes.
I believe you had another one?
and
Yeah,
just for clarification,
Josh?
Josh is not participating
Oh.
as a voting member tonight. He is participating in the discussion, but not for purposes of counting as toward a quorum for our electronic meeting guidelines.
okay, and then regarding the maximums for the annual rate schedule, be the first section of that. Last week, I distributed a proposal I had that changed the maximums to be within $500 to $1,000 higher than what we budgeted for those positions. And I can read through all of those numbers or just submit this as part of my motion. Okay.
If there's a motion to,
So I would move to amend ordinance 2022-25 to change the maximum salaries on the annual rate schedule to reflect the changes I have made on this schedule and submitted to you guys last week.
Councilman, is that for, just to get some clarity on your motion? Because it's kind of vague right now, because I'm not sure council has seen what you're proposing there, dollar amount wise. Were you talking about amending the salary range for every presented job classification in the salary ordinance, except for the amendment earlier to correct the mistakes relative to the,
Yeah, accepting those and accepting the hourly positions. This is strictly, I guess it would be more clear if I would just read them all. I'm going to just read the new maximums, and these maximums are,
Could you sit a little closer to the microphone,
sorry about that.
Councilman? Thank you.
These maximums are within $500 to $1,000 higher than what we are appropriating for these positions. So, to restate the amendment, I move to amend ordinance number 2022-25 to alter the maximum salaries to the following levels for the following positions. Mayor's executive assistant, $55,000. Deputy mayor, chief of staff, $69,000. HR generalist, $35,000.
point of order. Could you give the current maximum and the proposed maximum, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's, so mayor's executive assistant, that one's actually unchanged, 55,000 to 55,000. Deputy mayor changed from 70,000 to 69,000. HR generalist from 40,000 to 35,000. First deputy clerk treasurer from 55,000 to 45,000. Second deputy, 55,000 to 46,000. Third deputy, 55,000 to 53,000. Fourth deputy, from 44,000, we're not allocating for it, but from 44,101.20 to 44,500, just for ease of numbers. Community relations director and legislative aide from 60,000 to 59,500. Communications assistant, community relations from 45,000 to 35,000. Part-time admin, community relations from 25,000 to 13,000. Economic development director from 90,000 to 85,000. Community outreach coordinator, economic development from 48,825 to 44,000. Economic development administrative assistant from 35,000 to 13,000. Director of planning, preservation, and design from 60,000 to 55,000. Planning office coordinator from 47,132 to 33,000. Building inspector from 48,400 to 42,500. Historic preservationist from 48,000 to 43,500. Associate planner from 50,000 to 43,500. Nuisance officer, 40,000 to 34,000. Airport manager from 60,000 to 55,500. Airport assistant manager, 50,000 to 45,500. Fire chief from 47,300 to 26,000. Police chief from 75,000 to 70,000. Police secretary, 45,000 to 42,500. Records clerk, 40,000 to 35,000. Police major from 65,000 to 64,000. Animal Control Officer, 45,000 to 42,500. Parks Director, 61,633 to 61,000. Golf Pro from 65,000 to 65,500. Parks Administrative Assistant from 50,000 to 47,000. Parks Assistant Director from 54,797 and 60 cents to 42,500. Motor Vehicle Highway Clerk from 50,000 to 47,000. And Citywide Maintenance Coordinator from 20,000 to 16,500. And that's all.
We need a second to be able to discuss this, right? That would be correct. I'll second.
Can I ask what, based on what the reduction, most of these are reductions, what this is based on as far as,
Based on the numbers that are budgeted for those salaries.
that are currently actually budgeted for those salaries? But this is a range, right?
Yes.
Correct.
So the minimums
So-
would remain the same.
Well, you actually went below, when you
Yeah.
moved some to 13,000, you went below
Below
the minimum.
the actual, okay.
minimum, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Just on this one right here, the part-time
there's
administrator.
several of them actually.
I only found one that he went below the minimum,
I think
but
there were two 13,000s that went below the minimum.
Okay.
Yeah, economic development admin.
Yes.
oh, okay.
That was an oversight on my part.
Any other questions or comments?
There you go. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. One, you're right, it is a range. And one of the issues, well, for last year's budget, I think it was last year's budget, I adjusted the ranges because we were gonna constantly have to be coming back before you to approve a higher rate. So we just slid that range so that everybody fits in that category as much as possible. The importance of ranges for me is that if we hire, and we have done a lot of hiring in the last year or two, we don't anticipate that going forward so much, but you hire people at different levels of experience, different skills, and sometimes we need that flexibility for a little higher than we would normally do, or we can bring somebody in at a little lower than we would. That makes a range importance. Sometimes we combine jobs and roles, and if we add something to someone's role, we need to be able to compensate them for that if they're taking it off of someone else's role. All of that gives us flexibility in a salary range. And then, of course, if the mayor wants to give someone, or a department head wants to give someone an increase outside of the annual cost of living increase, there's a little bit of room to do that. The only other thing I would mention is that when you're looking at your budget sheets, salary lines for individual positions, it's not always their salary. Some years there's an extra paycheck in the year, so we have to add extra to make sure that we can cover that without having to, come before you again. So there's little things like that that are built in the budget estimate that are actually not the salary amount. I can pull for you any actual salary that you want. They're close, but there are differences, and that's why things are built into the salary range, so.
Yeah, and I'll add that to that, which is we're constantly having to compete with other communities or even other businesses or industry or employers in Madison for talent. You know, we have an extremely low unemployment rate, and staffing our positions, whether it be, you know, in the street department and hauling trash, all the way up to professional level offices that require degrees, it's doing what you propose would make it very difficult to recruit, reward, and retain. And I don't think it's feasible to, you know, if we wanted to, you know, try to meet a matching offer, or someone leaves and we have to hire somebody else at a few $1,000s more, that we delay that process until we go through a revision and amendment to the ordinance. And how many times does council want to see that happen? Council's checks and balances here is the appropriations, and what we do is manage the staff so that the services of the city can continue uninterrupted. And in some instances, we're expanding those services. We're adding more professional staff. So I would ask council to not approve the amendment, leaving with management the flexibility to manage, and leaving with council the power of purse.
My intention behind this, proposing this amendment, was simply to provide council with a greater range of oversight when it comes to salaries, especially changes that happen throughout the year. There have been some rather large increases made throughout the year after we've gone through. They remain within the maximums. However, I believe a lot of this should come through council as we provide the check and balance to the executive office here.
I understand your rationale, but I also think that we have to be really careful at a council level that we don't micromanage our staff as well. There's a kind of fine balance there. We need to provide that oversight, but at the same time, there's a lot of factors that come into play, as Mindy pointed out, that we might not be aware of. I like ranges to be reasonable, so when you brought this up, it made sense to me. But I also think, but after thinking about it some more, I also think that we need to allow our staff to do what they need to do and still provide that oversight. But ranges can be based on a lot of different factors, and recruiting and retaining someone who has a lot of experience, it sometimes requires a higher range of pay, and other times you get somebody in fresh out of school with no experience, and that minimum makes sense. So,
Some of these are just so drastic, like $13,000 as the maximum. I mean, I guess if that's an extra duty pay of some sort, fine, but nobody can live on $13,000.
Well, then we shouldn't be allocated. We allocated 12,000, like for the administrative assistant, economic development, we're only allocating 12,500 for that specific position.
So the reason there's a higher number in the ordinance is because it's a part-time position. What we were originally proposing to do was share a part-time person between those two departments. We've since deleted that, but that's why it was there, and that's why those numbers were so much smaller than what's in the range.
Okay.
makes sense.
Any other comments or questions on this? So there is a motion on the table, and there has been a second. So we'll take a roll call vote on the amendment.
Dan DiTillo,
No.
Bartlett,
No.
Lucy DiTillo,
No.
Krebs,
No.
Chatham,
Yes.
Tevenall.
Yes.
I believe that amendment fails. So the ordinance is as it was presented with the previous amendment that passed. Is there any other questions, comments, or amendments from the council with regard to this ordinance? Anything from the audience? Okay, seeing none, this will move on to third reading. And the final ordinance on second reading is ordinance number 2022-29, and that is the ordinance of the City of Madison, Indiana, authorizing the acquisition, construction, and installation by the City of Madison, Indiana, of certain improvements by the extensions of city waterworks, the issuance of the sale of revenue bonds to provide funds for the payment of the cost thereof, including the issuance of notes in anticipation of such bonds, and the collection, segregation, distribution of the revenue of such waterworks, and other related matters. This ordinance is on second reading, and we have had some amendments. You have a red line version of the ordinance in front of you. There are some amendments, and they're, fair amount. I can read through. We were presented with a memorandum from our bond counsel with regard to that. The main areas, or the areas that were amended, were the extension of the maximum permissible term of the bonds to 35 years from 30 years, with the expectation that the term of the bonds will in fact not exceed 30 years. That amendment was actually suggested to us by the SRF, which is our borrowing agency, as to what they wanted to see. The next was a clarification of which funds and accounts relating to waterworks revenues need to be kept separate from each other. The next was a correction of an internal section reference, and the addition of Exhibit B, the form financial assistance agreement that the SRF requires. These are all recommended by our bond counsel that need to be included, and so if we could get a motion to adopt or to amend the ordinance pursuant to what's been presented in the red line version by our bond counsel, Tom Pittman, I would appreciate that.
I'd move to amend ordinance 2022-29 to reflect the 4 changes outlined on Mr. Pittman's memorandum.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Because I could have called for a roll call vote. Is there any opposed? Okay. That amendment passes. So is there any other questions on this ordinance or comments? Hearing none, this will move forward on third. Is there any questions from the audience on this ordinance? Hearing none, this will move to third reading at the next council meeting. I believe that is all of the business as it pertains to bills and ordinances.
Open it up to public comments. If there's anybody here who would like to address the mayor's office and council, now would be a time.
You're up.
I said my piece.
And even though this is a special meeting, it would be remiss if I didn't take an opportunity to give you some updates. Starting to feel like Grandpa Jones from Hee Haw, giving you what's for dinner. You probably saw last Friday that I attended the Southern Indiana Regional Development Authority meeting where City of Madison was presented a check for approximately $2.1 million, which is final funding approval for the first 2 ready grant projects, the Gateway and the Mulberry Street Arts Corridor. We're very excited about that. I want to offer some congratulations as well to Ivy Tech and Hanover College. They were presented with a check for $5.9 million to contribute toward the vet tech clinic that they are collaborating on. That's also a very exciting and very worthwhile project. Yesterday we had a groundbreaking for Oak Hill Neighborhoods Park improvements. Pretty exciting to see the transformations happening all across that neighborhood. If you get an opportunity to drive through there, all of the infrastructure work that's been going on for the last 6 months or so are finally going to be topped off in the next couple of weeks with final mill and paving of the neighborhood. But we did break ground and recognized our major donors for helping bring the park renovations, much needed, long overdue park renovations to fruition. And then today, I'll just mention that we hosted a Southeastern Indiana Mayor's Roundtable at Cotton Mill. There was probably almost a dozen mayors there and several state legislators who cover this district, and we shared ideas and talked about what's going on in our communities. A lot of great things happening all over the region with the other mayors and here in Madison. But a lot of the conversation was focusing on this upcoming legislative session and some priorities that we have policy-wise, particularly preserving funding for roads and streets and capital-intensive projects that we have, and working with side by side with our state legislatures and AIM and the Indiana Conference of Mayors to put forth those policy objectives to the next state assembly's session, as well as work with the governor's office on another round of Ready Grant funding. So there's a lot happening all across our region and the state, and the Cotton Mill Fairfield was an excellent place to host that meeting, and all of them were very complimentary of Madison's riverfront and the Cotton Mill. I'll pause there and answer any questions that you all might have of me. Our next meeting is next Tuesday, October 18th. Josh, anything from you, sir? Okay.
I move that we adjourn.
I second the motion.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Dan, let's hang out, okay? I want to thank everybody for the time tonight. I know it was a special meeting, and appreciate everybody's conversation about the topics. Josh, thank you. We'll see you. Bye. Sure.